Hello, welcome everyone to From the Ground Up. I'm John Boydnott, your host of this podcast that appears on CEO Official Mag, which is one of Grit Daily's websites, and we get seen by several thousand folks on YouTube every week, which is fantastic. We give advice here for entrepreneurs. We talk to entrepreneurs who give advice, and they tell us their stories. They give advice for other entrepreneurs out there who are watching on how they can run their businesses better and that sort of thing. So today, joined by Amit of Gomboc AI. Hi, Ian. How are you?
I'm pretty good, John. Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm good. Great to have you on the show. Yeah, we're taping this. It's the week of Thanksgiving, and it's a short week, so I think there's a lot of an attempt to get everything into just 3-4 business days during the
I know,
week.
right?
Yeah, and here we are. And you're back. You're in New York. I'm over in the Bay Area, and it's great to have you on the show today. Tell us about Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your background, and tell us about Gomboc AI.
Sure, yeah. Pretty excited to be here. So again, thanks for having me. Personally, my background is in security. Yeah, I've been practicing security for over 25 years. Started as a hacker, pen testing, red teaming, consulting, all the kind of the traditional path. Ended up as a chief security officer for a couple of public companies here. And in my background, I also have another startup, as a founder back in 2004, which leads us to where I'm at today. We started Gomboc about 3 years ago after I finished my last role as a CISO and decided to step it up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, so Gomboc AI, tell us about what it does. I know we were talking before the show. You mentioned deterministic AI, which is different than sort of more generalistic AI that is out there. But you guys you help DevOps be more efficient. Tell us about all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said before, I started Gomboc on the heels of my last role as a CISO, and it was mostly to address some of my frustrations as a chief security officer, which stemmed from the fact that I could get phenomenal visibility into all the problems because that's what security tools do, but it left me, wanting more because visibility is one thing. However, addressing those things that the security tools alert you on is a completely different topic. And when it comes down, again, specifically in my cloud environments and cloud security, when it comes down to actually fixing those things, I realized that there's a lot of inefficiencies in the process. As I said, I could detect things very quickly and accurately, but then the only way to fix it was to basically pass it along to DevOps and tell them, hey, this is wrong, do this right. And there's two problems here. One is, you're only pointing out a problem. You're not coming up with a solution. You're basically dumping more work on someone else's desk. And two is that particular someone, typically DevOps, is already overworked, underpaid, and security is not top of mind. And that means that whatever issues that you're finding, they're not going to get solved unless something really, really substantial happens. And again, realizing all the inefficiencies around that process, I decided to start Gomboc initially, actually as a security company that instead of just throwing alerts at you, delivers you the fixes, comes up with a deterministic, and this is the first time that we're going to mention that, not the last, a deterministic fix to your cloud environment in a way that makes it super easy for the DevOps on the other side to take that and say, oh, awesome, this is way better than just raising alerts and forcing me to do a lot of work. You did the work for me. All I have to do is kind of use that in my environment. And so that's really the kind of the origin story of Gomboc. And again, you've mentioned that yourself. Generative AI is just not cutting it when it comes down to engineering tasks. And I know that there's been a lot of debate around, is it going to replace developers? Yes, no. That's really, the bane of the issue and really the core of the discussion between people who say, yes, this will replace developers and people who say it's not, it's still not cutting it. It's really that level of determinism, the correctness that's at stake here. And that's exactly what we're doing here.
Very good, very good. So you guys, you integrate into existing Git workflows. You're basically creating benefits for the development teams out there. Describe us. I also have noted. You're accelerating remediation cycles. You're doing a lot for productivity. So give us some
Right.
metrics, some examples of your impact in what you provide for companies.
Yeah, absolutely. It boils down to a very simple metric. Yeah, a typical issue, it takes anywhere between 8 to 12 hours of engineering work. Again, this is net hours of working on something to be resolved. Uh, by utilizing Gomboc, we can shorten that to about 20, 25 minutes.
Wow.
That is it. That's the only number and the only metric that we're being measured on. Obviously we show up on other dashboards in terms of the backlog that we're helping kind of crush down, the security posture and attack surface, and all different things. But when it really comes down to measuring our efficacy, it's how much time we just saved for an operational arm of the organization, again, engineering, DevOps, and how much time we're basically buying them back. So think about 10 hours of engineering time that you can now spend on something much more important than fixing an issue, a misconfiguration. So that's what we do. That's the main metric.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what feedback have you received regarding the usability, the effectiveness of Gomboc AI for the development teams? Tell us about that. If you want to share any case study results too, that's always good as well.
Sure. You know what? I'll start with the initial kind of the journey of the feedback is typically, sure, that'll be great if you can deliver it. And then it continues to, oh, we can probably do that with generative AI. I'll just throw in Claude, Copilot, Duo, ChatGPT, whatever it is, at the problem, and I can get the same thing without paying you. And then, the journey typically kind of goes towards, this works. Sometimes I get this is not going to work, and ends up with, it actually did work. I was just not familiar with this specific functionality and this specific configuration option of a
Huh.
service. And the journey typically ends with, all right, can I use the dashboard from the Gumbok portal to show my management, the ROI that I'm getting for the platform. So that's really kind of again, as I want to make sure you get the full version of the feedback, not just I've got a fancy dashboard that shows me all the benefits. Because that's really part of the entrepreneurial, I think, journey of finding the right product market fit and then working with the customers, working with my audience to realize what is exactly going to be the thing that makes them go, this is cool. Let's keep using that. Let's get the benefits. A really cool case study really talks about one of our recent customers who saved over 30% of their engineering time. Again, this is overall. And when you're talking about a team that's got a couple dozen engineers, that is a lot of working time that gets now, that can be redeployed into, as I said before, much more interesting areas rather than dealing with a backlog of alerts where, honestly, a lot of those alerts are false positives driven by security products that are just like signature based. So again, that's a really cool case study that we're actually about to release publicly with a couple of our recent customers.
I'd be interested to hear what the next year or two looks like to you, what you're sort of looking at as far as the progress that you guys are going to be able to make in terms of the, providing even more help for clients. What are sort of your goals and thoughts about the next year or two, and even I suppose in the years coming after, about the difference that you guys are going to be able to make for companies looking to build efficiency for their DevOps?
Right. I think the most exciting part that I'm looking at in the next year or two is really showing how choosing the right AI models is going to become a primary business objective or kind of a task. Right now, what we're seeing is everyone's trying to, to use one chip, the Gen AI chip, and they're betting everything on it, not realizing that Gen AI can do many different things, but it also has deficiencies in other tasks. You're not going to use the same algorithm, the same model that generates poems and pictures of fake celebrities to do your engineering work. It's a completely different task with completely different success criteria. So I'm really excited to see how, as one of the pioneers of bringing deterministic AI in the landscape that is pretty much filled with generative AI, is going to change the landscape of how AI is addressed, is utilized, and how it's augmenting business processes. That's really where it's at, and how it's changing not really the jobs themselves, but the job definitions, and how we're giving the right tools for employees these days to accomplish what they want to.
I'd be interested to hear, for those entrepreneurs out there who are considering utilizing a tool like the one you offer, Gomboc AI, at what point do you leave Claude behind? At what point do you know that it's time to leave Claude and the others behind and go with your deterministic model? Why
Right.
that would provide so much more help?
So small correction. I wouldn't leave Claude behind. Again,
Right,
Claude
right,
and
right.
ChatGPT and all those things are phenomenal. We actually work side by side. So, going back to my analogy with the poem, all right, you can let Claude write a poem about how would you like to see your cloud environment look like, okay? Now, it's going to be very creative. It might have some inaccuracies. It might have some hallucinations around what does that look like, because again, it's not grounded with reality. Now, take that poem, take that description, and it can generate beautiful code. Again, that's one of the feedbacks that we're getting from customers, like, oh, we're using Copilot, Duo, whatever it is, and it's generating code that looks beautiful. The only problem is that it doesn't work. It fails to complete. So that's where we come in. We work side by
Mhm.
side with Claude, with Copilot, with those models. We take their output, and they're doing, again, a phenomenal job of kind of imagining what does that look like. And we ground them in reality. We remove the hallucinations. We make everything deterministically accurate to your environment based on whatever cloud providers that you're using and the services and the resources that are available there. And we make that meet your specific policy. So think about us again as that grounding element that unlocks the promised efficiencies and creativity from generative AI tools, and really delivers that promise for real in an engineering setup.
You got it. Yeah. No, yeah, I should have said something along the lines of, still continuing to use them, but,
Yeah,
utilizing a tool that you provide to make sure that it executes properly and works properly, all the rest of it. But,
exactly.
well, so as far as, aspiring tech entrepreneurs in this space, the DevOps cloud infrastructure space, what's some advice that you would give for entrepreneurs who are looking to start a business in this realm and be successful?
So the first advice that I typically tell those young entrepreneurs is don't do it. Only after they only it's like you have no idea what you're walking into, but only after they've not listened to that advice and they come back and like, well, Ian, I didn't listen to you. I actually started a company. Can you help me now? I was like, all right, you're cut from the right cloth. Now let's talk about what to do. The second advice I would come up with is, and again, this is something that I've practiced myself and kind of got burned by myself, is it's going to be very hard to remove your own biases, especially if you're more experienced. So there is an advantage to entrepreneurs who actually have less experience because they have less biases around a particular area of expertise. Again, I come from over 25 years of practice in security. I've got a lot of biases with me, which makes my job harder in terms of removing those and really, really listening to the market, to the customers, to the partners, to the practitioners, and trying to understand exactly, what did they experience as far as the problem domain? How did they define it? How did they define success? Rather than lean on my experiences. And again, even though there are a lot of them, but they're all coming from my perspective and the way that I used to run organizations. So, my problem might be, valid. It might be valid for a lot of other organizations, but they weren't managed the way that I'm managing, or I used to manage my organization. So that bias removal is really, really key, and is really a make or break for a lot of companies. And again, taking it back into the Gomboc journey, as I said, we started as a security company. We started as, pitching to security practitioners and leaders saying, hey, you want to make a change? Instead of just detecting things and alerting, here's how you do that. And again, I had to learn the hard way that they can't. They're not really the buyer, because the buyer is really the one who's implementing things, and that's not security, that's engineering. And to be honest, if engineering would let security actually make changes, that would be a problem. So,
Yeah.
overcoming those biases, kind of reading the market correctly, removing yourself from the equation at the right times, is really one of those key kind of advice that I would focus on with entrepreneurs these days.
Any other big challenges, like maybe one or two of the? You've already mentioned a few of the challenges that you faced, but are there any other key challenges that you dealt with in running Gomboc AI that taught you some lessons that budding entrepreneurs can learn from?
Yeah, hire for your weaknesses. I'm not a great salesperson. I'm not a phenomenal marketing person. I'm a pretty good security engineering kind of practitioner. I ran large teams, but when it comes down to the areas that I'm less fluent with, it's all about the timing and making sure that you hire the right person who can actually get, or compensate for those areas. And I know it sounds cliche and it sounds trivial, but having that self-reflection ability and saying, truly, this is where, I can try to get better. I can definitely get better at it, but I need someone. I need someone to rely on, to hire, to be with me, to be kind of the left brain to my right brain, or vice versa. That's, and identifying those as the journey continues, because you're going to find new areas that, I need a proper product person. Let's bring someone here and work with me on that, on productizing an idea and driving that to the market. I've mentioned before, marketing, sales, these are things that are going to kind of have different priorities along the journey, and it's really about finding the right people for the kind of the size of that problem at the right time.
As far as security and governance go, what ways does Gomboc embed security and governance into every stage of the development process? Why and why is that why is that approach so important?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the short answer is, we probably implement that at every stage. From the moment that someone opens up their IDE, their integrated development environment, and starts writing code and editing code, as early as that, we're going to be there, sort of, on their left shoulder, being their sort of DevOps co-pilot, helping them get the right code in place. And we'll accompany them from that point on forward throughout the GitOps kind of life cycle. So we will be reviewing code that someone else pushed in, and we will provide code reviews and fixes for those, all the way down to the actual deployment through the CI/CD pipelines, to the deployment of those into the cloud. We're going to be there to, again, not just tell them that they're doing something wrong, but to tell them that we have a fix for something that's incorrect or that violates a policy in their environment. And that will basically empower security to get that full embeddedness into the process. It's really what the shift left kind of effort was trying to do previously. But security shift left ended up with just throwing more alerts earlier in the process. Not really helpful. A true shift left would be not just showing up with alerts, but showing up with fixes. And that, my friend, gets us into productivity world rather than complaining world. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of the longer version of throughout the entire process. That's where we're embedded or enabling security and governance.
And that's great because it's putting you past what the typical solutions that most people are using. It gets you past those, and it gets you into a new area,
Exactly.
separates you from other companies, which is great. So, well, as far as the long term vision for Gomboc AI, how do
Mhm.
you this the space that you're in is rapidly changing. If the long term vision could even mean 6 months out or a year out, but it's changing so fast. The cloud tech and DevOps. How are you guys going to navigate that? What are your plans going forward?
A great question. I wish I could give you a solid answer. Honestly, it's going to be, tracking what's going on out there, adapting to it. As I said, we started in security. Now we're much more focused on operations. Everything is changing all the time. And again, that's part of the excitement of running a startup company as an entrepreneur. Yeah, I'll go back to my previous answer. It's really about finding the right opportunities to show value. Whether again it's on the IDE side where everyone is vibe coding and generating 10x the code, we can help them, reduce the 10x bug generation that comes with generating 10x the code. So it's really always understanding where do we fit into that value equation and capitalizing on that. So it means that the focus has to change, the marketing, the packaging sometimes has to change while you provide a core efficiency. And the core efficiency is not really changing; it's just changing in the way that it shows up.
The mistakes that some of the Claude whatever seems to be getting most of the abuse from me today, but but
I don't discriminate, by the way; they're all making phenomenal mistakes. It's
yeah. So clearly there's a situation where you're using these tools to make life easier, but then next thing you know, you end up with 10 extra things that you didn't realize you're going to have to do. Now you have to do them. Um, uh, you know, is that going to improve? Is my question. Do you have any insight into whether or not these tools are going to start to become a little bit more sharp, or not that they're not sharp
yes.
already, but you know,
Yes, no, so 100%. They are improving, and we're seeing those initiatives. For example, the latest initiative from Amazon's AWS. They made public, they released publicly Kiro, which is a spec-driven development tool. So spec-driven basically means I'm going to define the constraints so that, again, I'm kind of minimizing the leeway or the creativity that Gen AI models can operate within to within a predefined spec. So the short answer is, again, yes, these are continuously improving. The longer answer is, do you want to spend Gen AI cycles and sort of wrangling and wrestling with prompt engineering to produce more, uh, results that are closer to being correct, rather than compounding those with a deterministic model that is much more cheap, much more effective in finding those constraints and coming up with something more specific. So it, for some tasks, specifically around vibe coding, I think spec-driven development is going to lead the charge in terms of minimizing the errors. In other tasks that are much more engineering focused, such as DevOps, I believe that deterministic AI will be that right component. So the combination of those is really where it's at, and I'm super excited to see those efficiencies all across the board, as we're augmenting the engineering and development experience and providing tools for engineers to become 10x developers.
it's great. Yeah. So now, Gomboc AI, you had a senior role, security role in your prior work, and you started Gomboc AI. This is your first company that you founded yourself?
Yeah, yeah. Again, I was a co-founder in a previous company back in 2004, but in Gomboc AI, I pretty much started based on my again experience and vision of what's the right way to do things.
How was the journey of starting this company after so long? I'm sure when you started that company back in 2004, Gomboc AI, you've had this for 3 years now. So you're sort of in the new startup world and ecosystem now. And maybe tell me what were some of the differences across those decades that you noticed?
Oh, yeah. I'll start with fundraising. Again, back in 2004, it was way harder. And, we raised so little money compared to what's needed these days. And, so again, fundraising is probably the biggest one if I'm comparing 20 years ago versus today.
Yeah.
The landscape is completely different. VCs are, are a dime a dozen these days. Back in the time, you had to really shop around and find
Mm,
the right person to bet on you. And I think that, again, in a good way, the landscape these days really accommodates everyone, whether you're, a seasoned entrepreneur or a professional, or you're very young and you just have like a phenomenal idea. The market these days allows for so much experimentation, again, with the added cost of, throwing money and expect and realizing that it's not going to materialize. We don't want to, use the B word, the bubble word, but I believe that, maybe not going to be a burst of a bubble, but it's going to be some shrinkage. There's going to be some growth and shrinkage of that landscape as that experimentation takes place, especially as we get to a point of realizing efficacies. Right now, we're throwing billions of dollars into this industry without an expectation of returns. And
mm.
at some point, someone's going to
Gambling.
be, all right, I need to, to cash in on the bill. I need to find some efficiency. So again, we're going to experience that. I think it's much more accentuated these days versus, again, 20 years ago, where
Mm.
you had to be, you really had to provide those efficiencies and uh, show revenue efficiencies very early on into the journey. These days, you know, you're talking years into the future.
Yeah, it's a little more. It's a little. I said gambling, but that's maybe a little too harsh. But it's a little more fly by the seat of your pants. There's a lot of opportunities for folks to be able to really get their shot,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a different scene altogether. But okay, so for Gomboc AI, tell everyone where that if they're looking for a solution like this to improve the efficiency of their DevOps and all the rest of it,
Mhm.
what's the best way that they can get in contact with you and the company and check out the product?
Right on. So best way to get in touch with me is or either email or LinkedIn. I'm always happy to respond. The most effective way to figure out what do we do and how do we do it is go to our website, Gomboc AI. And an even more effective way of getting hands-on experience with what we do without going through the marketing fluff is going to our community edition on the website. So Gomboc AI/community, you can actually download a completely free, don't talk to anyone, not me, not my salespeople, have an experience. See what it's like to get a deterministic AI deliver fixes at your code within fractions of the second. We're not talking about thinking and processing and burning through dozens of tokens or hundreds of tokens. We're talking about here's the fix, here's the gap that you have, I've got it covered. So feel free to download the community edition. It works in VS Code, Cursor, Kiro, whatever editor you're using, and get a firsthand experience in that. If that's something that you find effective, then come talk to us to figure out how to deploy that en masse around your organization.
That's great, Ian. It's been really great having you on the show to give some advice for the entrepreneurs out there and telling them about your solution and how they can find it.
Right on. Thanks for having me, John.
My pleasure. Great to have you, Ian.